As you know, we take to the polls this Thursday to decide on the new Fiscal Stability Treaty. This video hopes to provide you with a better understanding of what it is all about. So, what is the Fiscal Stability Treaty? Fiscal means money to do with the government. So this includes government spending, taxes, deficits, and debt. Basically, the treaty is a set of rules that aims to make Eurozone countries keep balanced budgets. So, how do you measure debt? Both of these men owe €20. Mr. Monopoly is clearly richer than Mr. Stick. €20 means more to Mr. Stick. Measuring in terms of amounts of money is not a good comparison. So, we need to find a better way of measuring debt. €20 is 1% of what Mr. Monopoly has, but €20 is 10% of what Mr. Stick has. So we can say Mr. Stick is more in debt than Mr. Monopoly. This is why debt is measured in percentage. We can say the same for countries. Let's take Ireland. In 2007, Ireland owed 25% of what it had. In 2011, Ireland owed 108% of what it had. This means that we actually owed more than we had. But what do we mean by what a country has? A country has the value of all the stuff it makes and all the services that are provided. This is called GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. So, Ireland owed 108% of its GDP. Now, let's talk about deficit. Deficit is the amount you lack, and, just to remind ourselves, debt is what you owe. There are two types of deficit: general government deficit and structural deficit. We can think of government deficit as buying a pair of shoes one month and having to go easy the next. And we can think of structural deficit as simply living beyond our means. But what does this mean for the government? General government deficit is simply vanilla deficit, more money going out than money coming in. It can be caused by once-off spending. Remember the shoes. Structural deficit is a bit more technical, but the concept is easy. It's a hypothetical version of government deficit, and it's a more useful measure of how the economy is functioning because it's what the deficit would be if the country were normal and excluding once-off spending. Structural deficit doesn't depend on the current economic climate. It's an indicator of a country living beyond its means. So, what are the current rules about government deficit and debt? The Maastricht Treaty was agreed upon in 1992. According to this, general government deficit can't rise above 3% of GDP. Remember, general government deficit is a yearly figure, but debt can accumulate over time. So Maastricht also says that total government debt must stay below 60%. The Fiscal Stability Treaty builds upon this. So what are the new bits? There are basically four key parts: the structural deficit rule, national law, Court of Justice of the European Union, and general deficit rules. Let's look at each in turn. The structural deficit rule is pretty much what it says on the tin. The treaty says that a country's structural deficit must not be greater than 0.5% of GDP. If the structural deficit goes above this target, it will be given a time limit by the European Commission, during which they must work to reduce it. The treaty allows for a certain flexibility in exceptional circumstances. This treaty requires us to put these new laws into Irish law. The new laws will contain a correction mechanism. The correction mechanism will outline what we will do if we do not reach our targets for reducing structural deficit. We will also be bound by European law. If we ratify the treaty, but we fail to put the structural deficit rules into national law, the Court of Justice of the EU may get involved. If we disobey the court may fine us by up to 0.1% of our GDP. General deficit rules. If we ratify the treaty, and if a majority of euro area countries agree, this means that we will have to support the European Commission on decisions they make on how a country should reduce its general deficit. Now, what about bailouts? Ratifying this treaty will not affect our current bailout with the Troika. Regardless of the outcome of this referendum, a new bailout institution is expected to be set up by July 2012. It is called the European Stability Mechanism, or ESM. According to the European Stability Mechanism Treaty, only countries that have signed the Fiscal Stability Treaty can apply for bailouts. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it informative, and remember to go vote this Thursday.